Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sporting Fan Podcast. With the NRL season starting this week, I would quickly want to talk about last year's season and how I think the clubs will go for this year. It is quite an interesting topic because it's always hard to say, at the start of the season, you have all the pre-season favourites saying, I reckon this team's going to do that well, and that team's going to do well, and then all of a sudden they get 5 injuries to key players and long-term injuries, and they end up fading away and being atrocious. And then there's always that one team that is a bit of a smoky that does a little bit better than what you expect, and then there's all the teams in between. And then obviously the other side of that is that, the opposite ends, you do teams that do exactly how predicted, and you have other teams that, that do as poorly as predicted. So it's always hard to tell. I'll start with last year's Wooden Spooners, the Tigers. Last year was an absolute, nightmare. Any team that finishes last, obviously, has a bad year. So, the Tigers, it's hard to say anything that hasn't already been said about the Tigers. They just seem to like to blame the coach. And this is a management I'm talking about. Both the board and the management like to axe a coach. So they've rehired Tim Sheens, who they sacked a few years ago. They've also sacked Mick Potter, Jason Taylor. They've also sacked Michael Maguire midway through last year. Brett Kamali took over the second half of last year. It's just you have to look at what hasn't changed at the Tigers. They're constantly rotating players. They're constantly rotating management. Coaches, I should say. What has stayed the same, and it's the management. Now, Pascoe, who's the CEO, was also the CEO of Penrith. Now, Penrith were a basket case about 10 to 15 years ago. We were on the verge of going into insolvency. They were about to go under. Then they sacked. Gus Gord came in, told the board to get rid of Pascoe, which they did. He went to. No one would give him a loan because they were literally, like I said, on the verge of going insolvent. And then he went to Packer and said, James Packer and said, look, mate, we're in it. And he just was honest with him. He goes, look, we need a team at Penrith. It's a rugby league heartland, but we're about to go under. We're up shit creek. No bank, no financial lender, no one is going to lend us money. This is what my plan is, but I need a little bit of money. You're not going to get your money back straight away. You will I believe that you will in the long term once we set these. We set everything up. I genuinely believe that we're going to get profitable. And Packer took it. All credit to him. Took a chance, and that's where we all know where Penrith is now. Runners up in 2020 in the grand final. They lost to Melbourne, won 2021, and then they won virtually all grades, including first grade. Last year, they also won reserve grade and a few other junior comps. That's where it is now, and the club's profitable. The club is thriving, and there's everything's going from strength to strength there at Penrith. And yet the Tigers thought it was a good idea to buy this bloke, and look where they are now. Admittedly, they've with the exception of really 2005, and I know they made the prelim in 2010, and they had a good year again in 2011. But outside those 3 years, they haven't really done anything. They've merged. There was a merger of the foundation clubs, the West Magpies and Balmain Tigers, and Balmain. I don't know what's going on there. It's always 1 minute their Leeds club's going, redeveloped, and they're going to have the Leeds club. Next minute it's not. The next, it's not going to get developed, and it's just and then it is, and then it's not, and then it is, and it's not, and it's just going like, well, West are kind of going, well, we need to know one way or the other. You can't just keep going on and on every 2 seconds, flipping and flopping, saying, we are, and then we're not, and we are, then we're not. They just will. And the NRL is also saying, like, we need a bloody answer as well. It's not just West. And Pasco's just, joke. I don't think he's not the guy to turn the club around. He's useless. I think he's not the guy. He might be good at some things, but he should not be a CEO of a rugby league club because he's failed. The board needs to go. I don't know if the answer is to split the club, go solely, have the West Magpies go solely alone and ditch Balmain, just like the Northern Eagles did. They ditched North Sydney. Manly ditched North Sydney and after they merged, and then they just said, we're going alone. Whether that's an option, I don't know. But yeah, I don't think they really have a plan as to how they're going to get back to the top. They should be a top 4 team. They should be making the finals every single year. They should have a developmental system in Campbelltown, which, like Penrith, is all rugby league. It should have that whole southwest region. They're all leagueies down there. Yet West Tigers have just neglected it, and they should have a shitload of juniors. They should have juniors coming out of their backside, and every year they should be cherry picking the best juniors and having the rest of the juniors go elsewhere. Instead, they don't have many juniors coming through, and their best juniors all go to other clubs. And some talent that are not juniors that they do attract to the club, they all end up leaving. Like, have a look. Some of the players that have left. They had blokes like Andrew Fafita, and I know people said, the last 3 or 4 years, people go, oh, Andrew Fafita, oh, what a joke. But people forget what he was like when he was at his peak at Cronulla after he left the Tigers. He was one of the best. If you'd probably put him at the top with the top 5 front rowers in the game at his peak. A lot of people thought he should have got the Clive Churchill medal in that 2016 grand final that Cronulla won. And then he left, and then you've got James Tedesco, dual premiership winner, Dally M winner, Australian captain, Origin winner, New South Wales captain as well. New South Wales winning captain. You just think and then you have other blokes like Mitchell Moses, played in the grand final last year for Parramatta. Also a local junior. I think Tedesco's a local junior as well, I believe. But he played in the grand final last year. Also played on Origin in 2021, I believe it was. Played in Game 3. It's just you look at the guy. Martin DePau again, same thing. These kind of the guys. Josh Addo-Carr's another one that's signed at the Tigers. And these are some of the guys that they've let go who are all, I know every club loses some, but they seem to lose all of them. And it's just, it gets to the stage where you have to eventually ask, can they improve? They've got a few good signings this year. They brought in John Bateman. They brought in Api Carousel, Isaiah Papali'i. So they've got a few good signings this year. I just can't see them going from strength to strength. I think they will do better than what they did last year. I don't think they see them finishing last again, but I also can't see them making the finals. I just can't see them being a team that really comes in and just blows the team off the park. I think that if they win, they'll only have small wins. They're going to win by 6 to 10 points. It's going to be relatively close. And when they get beaten, I think, against the lower teams, it'll probably be close. But once they come against some big teams like the Roosters, Penrith, South, I just can't see them being close. I know there was a couple of games that they were close against. They were, for example, round 1 last year. They were in the game for the majority of the match against Melbourne and that. But, then towards the end of the year, they got beaten 72-6 by the Roosters when their only try was through an intercept. So that could have easily ended up 76-70. And if they didn't take that intercept, the Roosters would have scored. So, it could have been 76 or 78-0. I just can't see, for 2023, I just can't see them improving. I can't see them getting, I can't see them making the 8, and I can't really see them, making the 8 anytime soon. Unless they, there's talk that they've got a lot of juniors coming through, so potentially they could improve in 3 or 4 years' time, but, unless something dramatically changes there, I can't see the Tigers ever really being a force in the team. If they make, if they do make the 8 in the next 5 years, which I can't really see happening, if they did, they're going to be knocked out first week, at best second week. They ain't going to win a premiership. And, yeah, I can't see them getting past even the first week of the finals. If they did, which I can't see them happening, the short side ain't getting past the second week. With the Warriors, it's hard to pinpoint the Warriors because they're in a bit of a tough spot. They had 2.5 years in Australia, where they couldn't go home simply because of COVID. New Zealand shut down lockout laws. They didn't, with their shutdowns, I should say, they didn't allow international travel. We had to have quarantine for 2 or 3 weeks if you're going over there. So they couldn't play over there. They were playing up in the Central Coast, so they were away from the family, away from the friends for a long time. A lot of them got homesick, went home. They had to have loan plays from the clubs, and then those players got called back when those clubs had injuries and that. So they just had toward the back end of last year, they were allowed to go back home. They were played in New Zealand. Again, their club is... I just think their management, again, is also a problem at the Warriors. Look at... It seems like they have their best years when, they've got a couple of Australians in their key position. For example, when they made the grand final in 2002, they had Ivan Cleary at fullback. I know they had Stacey Jones at halfback. He's, widely considered the New Zealand's greatest ever halfback, and if he's not the greatest, he's in the top 3. And then you had in 2011, you had James Maloney at halfback, Sean Johnson at so you had James Maloney at 5'8", and you had Sean Johnson at halfback, and that they just seem to, I don't know what it is, they just can't seem to attract local talent. It seems like if a quality player is in New Zealand, they either play rugby union or they go to league in Australia. Because you just look at some of the talent that's in Australia right now. That's from New Zealand. You got Joey Marnie. You got Brandon Smith. You got the Brumbish brothers, and you can just go on and on and on and on and on about the quality New Zealand players in Australia. But they don't play for the Warriors. Like, Joey Marnie got signed when he was 17. He should have been wrapped up by the Warriors when he was 15, 16. Like, the Roosters shouldn't have even had a chance to sign him. Because he was bloody 6'4" or whatever he is. When he was bloody 16, he was an absolute freak. One of the best players coming through the juniors. And they didn't bloody sign him. And the Roosters were like, yeah, we'll take him. And now he's, considered one of the best players in the game. He got, Brandon Smith's a bit of different story. You could kind of see, maybe they thought that he didn't have the commitment. Maybe, I don't know what the story is there. And then, but like, you just keep going, like, how do they keep missing their mark? They're a bit like the Tigers, right? But at least with the Tigers, they the one thing I will say about the Tigers, they at least had these players for a certain point. The Warriors just are not getting these players at all. Or if they are, they're having them like 1 or 2 years in the juniors, and then as soon as they're ready for first grade, they come over here to Australia. And it's just, I don't know if that's a management problem there, or if it's, a cultural thing over there in New Zealand where, if you stay in New Zealand, you play union rather than playing league. I don't know what the story is there, but, they just seem to not get over, they can't get over that final hurdle. They can't seem to get these top, players. How I think they're going to go in this year, I think they can have a slight improvement this year. But again, I can't see them, like the Tigers, I can't see them having a dramatic improvement. I can't see them being a top 8 team. I can't see them being, challenging for the premiership this year. I can't see them pushing the top teams. They just seem to have a culture of, a bit like the Tigers, as soon as things get hard, they throw in the towel and they roll over. So until they change, both clubs change that attitude, they're just not going to. They're not going to improve. Coming in 14th place last year was Newcastle. This team, I just can't. It's hard to put a finger on it, because Andrew John often, and Matty Johns says this as well. They love their footy up in the Newcastle, but the problem has been for the last few years. It just seems, they've never really recovered from Nathan Tinkler. I think that's been the biggest problem. Nathan Tinkler came in, changed all the management, and then basically a lot of things went wrong with him. There's, if you want to have a look at it, if you don't know the story, you can look it up. Basically, long story short, it wasn't, a lot of people across all these sporting teams and a lot of these businesses weren't getting paid. People walked out. People stopped playing, and I know it's been about 10 years. There was a few wooden spoons and quite a few wooden spoons and a lot of rebuilding, but it just seems that similar kind of situation, like a lot of bad management there, and then they didn't change. I think things are starting to improve at Newcastle. I think the one decision I believe they have got wrong is Kalen Ponga. Now, I know a lot of people that have listened to this podcast A lot of people that know me in my private life as well want to hear me say, guy that's got a lot of potential, shit attitude. And I still believe that. I think that he has the ability he has the potential to be, a top 5, top 10 player in the league. And he should be at his age. He's now in his mid-20s. He should be a top 5 or a top 10 player in the league. He should be the top 3 fullbacks. Probably, I would say it should be basically him, Trbojevic, and Ponga. It should be the top 3. Now, 2 of those are. One of them isn't. And the one that isn't is Kalen Ponga. Now, Trbojevic, he's injured a lot and that, so what have you. And then people will say, that's the same with Ponga. Ponga's injured a lot as well. The problem with the big difference between the two, I find, is attitude. Now, look at buddy Kalen Ponga last year. He's out with concussion. His team is playing, and the official story is had too much to drink, went to the bathroom with Kurt Mann, threw up, and he got kicked out. That's what the official story is. Now, of course, no one believes it, but let's just say for argument's sake, that is true. Why the bloody... you don't need to be a bloody concussion expert or a neurologist or neurosurgeon or whatever to realise that you've got a concussion, which is you got damage on the brain, you got bruising on the brain. Alcohol's not the greatest thing to have at the best of times in excess. Having a beer every now and then, having 1 or 2 beers is alright, but drinking to the point where you're vomiting, throwing up, especially when you're captain and you're out with concussion, it's beyond stupid. You're not an 18-year-old kid, he's in his mid-20s, he's 24, 25. It's just you need to grow the fuck up, mate. Honestly, because he's just not mature at all. It's just he clearly is one of these guys that I've always everyone's always told him that he's the greatest thing ever, and the publicity's got to his head. Now you look at Tedesco and you look at Trbojevic and you look at all the other great players in the game like Nathan Cleary and all these other blokes. What's the one thing that they all say? Yeah, they say, yeah, I'm a good player, but I always want to improve. I'm looking to improve my game. I want to improve this part of my game. I want to improve that part of my game. I want to keep improving. I want to keep getting better. Ponga is you hear Ponga speak, he thinks he's already all that. And it's mate, you're not. And with your attitude, you never will be either. Look at, classic example, I know I've brought him up a few times now already. James Tedesco. Australian captain. 2-time premiership player. Origin winning captain with New South Wales. Australian World Cup winning captain. This is a bloke that has literally won it all. He still wants to get better. Trbojevic, Dally M medalist like Tedesco. Also an Origin winning player. Actually won the Wally Lewis medal like Tedesco. Yet he always says, I want to get better. I want to get my body right to help Manly win a premiership. How often do you hear Ponga say that? You go, he's basically, the burnout, and I mean this as a full insult that it is. He's a burnout atomic of bloody rugby league. Guy that has the potential to be one of the greatest players, and instead he's going to go down as unless he changes his attitude, will go down as a bum. And he's going to go down as someone that has all the ability in the world, and he's not going to be there. And I think it was a mistake by Newcastle to pay him. Some are saying as much as $1.4 million a year. I think that was a big mistake, especially for a guy that's always out and clearly doesn't give a damn about the club. I think they should have had him more on 500 to 600 with bonuses. If both, he needs to set targets where the club needs to set targets. If you hit this goal, if the club team, and then if the team does this, and this, then that's what you do. And I think that way they could have bought somebody else. They could have, bought another top tier quality player while also incentivizing Ponga. And if he just says, "Well, I'm leaving, I'm going to the Dolphins," then great, good for him. Good for Newcastle, in my opinion. And I think that would have really helped if they did that. Where do I think they're going to finish this year? I can't see them moving up too much. I think they're going to be bottom. I can't see them getting up past the bottom 4, to be honest. I know they finished in the 8 in 2021, but unless something dramatically changes there, I can't see them really pushing towards the 8. The Gold Coast Titans finished one spot above the Knights. They had a good back end of the year. I don't know what it is with the Gold Coast, and this is not a slight on the Titans at all. They made the 8 in 2021, got knocked out by the Roosters in the first week. I just think they have... I don't know. It just seems like sports can't succeed on the glitter strip. The Gold Coast Suns in the AFL have always struggled. The A-League team that was up there, I can't even remember what the name was, they folded. The league's had several goes at teams on the Gold Coast, back in the 80s and late 80s, early 90s and that, and they all failed. So it's just I can understand why the NRL wants to keep a team on a team there simply because they don't want to lose all the Gold Coast to that whole population to AFL, and the bigger presence with rugby league in southeast Queensland. But I don't know. It just seems like they've never really got going, and I just can't see. I can't see them having success long term. Look, let me put it like this: they have the team. Do I think they have the team to make a top 8 team? Yes. Do I think they have a premiership winning team? No. But I think they have a team to make the 8. It's just that whatever happens on the Gold Coast, teams just don't have long term success. They have a year or two where they're really good, and then they have 2 or 3 bad ones, and then they have another good one, and it just seems like it's always and it's in all, like I said, it's in all sports, so it's not. This is not a slide at the management. This is not me having a go at the management of the Titans. I think they brought in good coaches. They've tried to get the best players that they've had, which unfortunately for them, they haven't always got the best players. I don't know. Could I see them, look, don't get me wrong, could I see them making the 8? Yes, potentially, but I can't see them really doing success or anything major in the finals. It'll be interesting to see if they do, but for their sake, I hope they do, but I just cannot see it happening, unfortunately. And I just can't see them ever having long-term success. Now, coming in one above them, was the Bulldogs. They had a really weird season last year. They basically, there was when they had Barrett there, and then they had it when they basically post Barrett. When Barrett was there, they beat the Roosters, but they were just so bad for the most part. It was people say, "Oh, I was a bit hit and miss." There were plenty more misses than hits. There was virtually no hits with them whatsoever. There was only one or two hits, like I said, with the Roosters, and I think there was one or two other good games. But other than that, they were just like people were basically saying if they don't get the wooden spoon, it's a bloody win for them. Like that's a successful season for them. And that shouldn't be your measure of the season. Like, every team you should be going, okay, we finished poorly last year. Okay, we want to finish towards somewhere around the middle and then succeed the following year. Well, the Bulldogs were at the bottom for several years and they weren't in you could say, you could accept it if you go, okay, the team's not winning, but there's improvement week on week. There was no improvement. They were just bad. They got rid of Barrett. Mick Potter came in, took over as head coach, and everything seemed to change. I don't know what it was. I'm pretty sure Mick Potter was on the coaching staff, but whether it was just something, the way he was putting things, new tactics, or what it was, the whole season changed for the Bulldogs. Yes, they were on the back of a few shellackings on the second half of last year, but they look like a completely different team the second half of the year. They were playing some really good footy. I went with a mate of mine out to the Bulldogs-Tigers game where they won. They were some of the best footy I've seen the Bulldogs play since they made the grand final in 2014. They played some really good footy, and it was by far and away the best footy they had played in a number of years. And, this year they've brought in Reid Marnie, Viliami Kikau, so they've got a couple of good signings and good positions. They're a strong possibility to be one team that finished in the bottom half of the 8 last year to move up into the top 8 this year. So I really think they could. Do I think they will win it? I still think they're one or two players short. I think, and this is not a slide on Kyle Flanagan. I think he's a solid player, but I don't think he's a halfback that will take you to a premiership. So I think they need a halfback. There's maybe one or two other backs I reckon they need to fill. But once they have those filled, I reckon they're a real strong forward. I think this year they could potentially finish the bottom half of the 8. I wouldn't be surprised if they win the first week of the finals, maybe even the second week. I can't see them getting past the prelim. I sure as hell can't see them making the grand final. But you never know. They could be that team that finishes in the bottom half of the 8 make the grand final. Do I think that's going to happen? No, but there's a potential that they could. And they've recruited really, like I said, they've recruited really well. And I really think it would just be interesting to see how Serraldo, a new coach, brand new coach, a lot of raps on him as an assistant when he was at Penrith. A lot of people think that he was basically, a lot of people have been saying for a few years now, he's going to be the next cab of the rank. He's the next, go-to coach. Now, it'll be just interesting to see how he goes there as now that he's not an assistant he's not in the background. He's, basically the face of the playing group, face of the club on the footy side, because the coach always is. It'd be interesting to see that now that he's not in the background, whether he can take them up and move them up the ladder. Because I think they've got the team. I think they're slowly starting to get there, and I think if he hits the right buttons, if he gets the defence right, gets everything in order, I honestly reckon they could. If there's one team that could cause an upset this year, it would be the Dogs. And then one team that the team that finished above them, in 11th spot last year was the Seagulls. Now, Jesus Christ, what to say about the Seagulls season in 2022? They were well on track to make the 8. They were around from memory, they were around 6th or 7th, going into round 19 against the Roosters, and then, basically, if you heard my podcast last year, I actually had an episode on it where I spoke about the Pride jersey, and Jesus Christ, that turned into a bloody shit show. They didn't win another game. The season just slid. They just really went off the rails. And Jesus Christ, was that bad. They didn't win another game. 7 blokes, stood down over the Pride jersey. I'm not really going to go into it simply because, like I've said, I've already done an episode on the whole, what I believe, my opinions on the whole, how that was handled. Quick recap if anyone that doesn't. Basically, it was a women in league round. All the other clubs were wearing a women's jersey. Manly, for whatever reason, wanted to go with a Pride jersey. And about 7 or 8 players who are very religious said, goes against our religious beliefs. We're not wearing the jerseys. We're not playing. Basically, fractured the playing group. Didn't win a game for the rest of the year. And Desi Hasler got sacked. Now, it was quite... if you're a Manly supporter, you would be pissed off. Apparently they did do quite financially well out of the sale of the Pride jersey, but how much money they got out of it, I don't know. Or if it's a sponsor that gets the sponsorship kit that gets majority of the money, I don't know. But yeah, it was just an absolute disaster. And look, I think it's a big risk to bring in, to sack Desi. They got a new coach, Anthony Seabolt, and I just think that is such a huge risk. Because just have a look at what happened at Brisbane. Look how he left the Rabbitohs. Look, as a Roosters supporter, I hate the Rabbitohs. But how he treated that club was nothing short of a fucking disgrace. It was an absolute joke how he left South Sydney. And then and obviously there was a lot of backstabbing and bullshit and all that kind of garbage at the Broncos. A lot of backstabbing stuff that happened there, but really he brought it on himself. That whole situation in 2021 where a lot of people wanted him gone. Yeah, it was just, he only had one person to blame, and that was himself. And now that Manly have brought him in, I think this is a big, big risk for, that was 2020. Sorry, that was 2020 that happened, not 2021, sorry. And, yeah, there was, I don't know why they sacked Hasler and brought him in, because I just think, I can't see it ending well. I can see it ending in tears with them. I think if he lasts 2 years, I'll be surprised, to be honest. Unless something dramatically changes. Let me put it like this. Manly have the team to be a top 4 team. Provided, everyone stays fit. If the Travojevic brothers stay fit for the majority of the year, DCE, all those blokes, they stay fit, they can finish in the top 4. Look what happened in 2021. They finished in the top 4. So they got a very similar squad to this year that they did 2 years ago. I know a couple of players have left and a couple of players have come in. But they have the ability to finish top 4 and challenge the top teams. I don't think Seabolt's the guy. If they had brought somebody else in, I think they can. But with him there, no, I can't see that. Maybe if they finish in the bottom, if they finish in the bottom half of the 8. But yeah, I just can't see them really challenging the top teams with him there. Dragons, I can't see them improving at all on last year. Here's a team struggled for a long time, the Dragons. Basically ever since Bennett left. Like, they've had a couple of good years where they've made the finals, made the second week of the finals and whatnot under Paul McGregor. But, under Hook, they haven't really done anything, which I was really surprised because when he was at Brisbane, when was that, about, 10 years ago now? When Bennett originally left Brisbane, and then he took over. He had a good, he had a good tenure then, and they axed him when Bennett came back, and then he was at Penrith, had a good tenure there before Buddy Gaskell sacked him for whatever reason. I don't know what's happened. I don't know if it's management. I don't know if it's the players just don't give a damn. I just don't know. Personally, I can see them actually going backwards from 10th position this year. They finished 10th last year. I can seriously see them finishing 13th, 14th, maybe even lower, 15th, 16th, or even get the spoon. Obviously with the 17 teams this year, I can see them even potentially getting, being one of the contenders for the spoon. I just can't see where they're going to improve this year. I don't think they've got really any big name signings. I don't think this. They haven't improved. I don't think there's anything that will suggest they got smoked in the Charity Shield. I just can't see anything where they can, where the improvement is coming. And I think they're actually going to go backwards, unfortunately, for Dragon supporters. I just can't see them. I can't even see them challenging the bottom teams, let alone the top teams, to be honest. I think it's going to be a long, long season for Dragons supporters. With the Broncos, their last season was they had a weird season last year. They started terribly, finished terribly, but had a strong middle of the season. Now, at the start of the year, it was basically it looked like it was the same as what they had in 2020 under Seabold. It looked like it was going to be the same as 2021 when Kevin Walters' first year. You thought, bottom of the year, towards the bottom of the table, whether it be last, second last. Maybe they won a few games. Maybe if they finished, around 12th, maybe. That was the best that they were going to do. And then all of a sudden, they went on a barnstorming run in the middle of that middle third of the year. And, everyone was, myself included, geez, where does this come from? They could, be a top 4 team. They were in the 4 at one stage last year. And then all of a sudden, very similar to what happened with the Seagulls, they just ran straight into a brick wall, and they just couldn't win a game. And they went from a team that you thought, a lot of people, look, they could potentially push for a, grand final spot this year. People didn't think they were going to beat Penrith, but they're they could push Penrith. They could challenge them. They could potentially, they could be a top 4 real contender this year. And then all of a sudden, they just went back to the ways that they were at the start of the year and the 2 years before that. And they just couldn't get up. They lost virtually every single game in the last about 6 or 7 rounds. They went from being in the top 4 to finishing 9th. And everyone was just what the hell happened? And look, personally, I think this one is the coach. I just can't see where Kevin Walters improves. He didn't do well in Origin. He didn't do, once he lost all those top players in Origin, like guys like Slater, Smith, Thurston, guys that are going to go down that people are still going to talk about in 50 years' time as some of the greatest players of all time, like, Inglis as well. All these blokes, they're not, and then he lost them, and then they couldn't, but Queensland barely could win a game. Then, when he was at Cattle, and I know this was, a long time ago, but when he was at Catalans, I think he had something like a 30% win rate. And then Trent Robinson, the Roosters' Trent Robinson, took over for 2 years there before he coached the Roosters. Within a year, had them playing finals, and within 2 years, had them been in the top 4. The same team, the Catalan Dragons. And yes, have the Broncos improved under him? Yes, they have. They got the wooden spoon when he took over, and now they finished 9th last year. But I just don't think he, you listen to blokes like Cobbo. Like, should have Cobbo come out and said what he said, saying that he's not a good coach? No. Does he know what a good coach looks like? I don't know. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But, he's come out and said, really nice bloke, can't coach. And, to be honest, he's not wrong. Like, look at it. If any, he's Cobbo's on the money. Like, they haven't won. He was supposed to be, the great fixer. And basically anyone that's followed his coaching career, basically said, look, unless he's changed something, they ain't gonna make the, they might, improve a bit, because they've, the quality of play that they have there is so good. Blokes like Cobbo and Katoni Staggs and the rest of them, they have quite a good team. It's just, if they made the 8, it was simply because the talent of the team is so good, and not because of Kevin Walters' coaching. I can't see them ever winning a premiership with Walters. They have the ability to be, well, as they showed for quite a bit of last year, they have the ability to be a top 4 team. They're not going to be a top 4 team with Kevin, in my opinion. They're not going to be a constant. They might get 1 year where they finish top 4, but they're not going to be a constant top 4 team. And then sure as hell ain't going to win a premiership with Kevin Walters as a coach. Could I see them making the finals? I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think they're really going to go far in the finals. Like, I think they'll basically do what the Sharks did last year. If they do miraculously somehow finish in the top 4, despite all that, they're going to get knocked out in straight sets. They won't win it. They're not going to trouble anyone in the finals. They're not going to, they're not going to trouble a fully fit Roosters team. They're not going to, or a majority fit Roosters team. They're not going to trouble the Rabbitohs, who are, if they're, majority fit. They're not going to trouble, Penrith. I just can't see them winning it, in my opinion. Well, there may be the Roosters. In saying that, Broncos have a very good... Even when the Broncos were down near the bottom, the Roosters were up near the top. The Broncos did have a good record against the Roosters. For whatever reason, the Roosters play poorly against them. So they might beat the Roosters. I take that back, as much as I hate to say it as a Roosters supporter. But I can't see them beating the others. Canberra Raiders. First team that I'm going to talk about that finished in the 8. They had a weird season last year. First half looked like they were going to be bottom 4. They couldn't beat anybody. They were bloody getting beaten by everybody. And then all of a sudden, they had a few blokes come back from injuries. And then all of a sudden, things started changing for them. They started winning. And all of a sudden, they just kept getting better and better and better and better and better. And then they won some ridiculous amount of games to make the finals. Beat Melbourne in Melbourne the first week of the finals, and which no one saw coming. And yeah, they just had a really strong back end of the year. And then all of a sudden, they were beating teams, and everyone's just going, "What is going on here?" And yeah, they had a really good back end last year. Terrible for start. And they actually were one of the better teams to watch. Like, they were throwing the ball around a bit. The problem is that they're very. I think what was happening is they're a very niggly team. And they get under the opposition's skin, and they frustrate teams, and that's how they were beating them. They were frustrating the opposition into making mistakes and beating them. Do I think they can improve on this year? Where do I think they can improve? I just think if they can keep majority of the team on the field, it's just hard, because the thing with Canberra is, when they're good, they're great. When they're bad, they're woeful. And that's one thing that that's one thing they really need to improve, because there's too much of a gap between their best and their worst. Like, they put let me put it like this. A classic example is their final round game against the Tigers, right? First half, they were phenomenal. They were good. Like, admittedly, the Tigers were shit house. Like, don't get me wrong, the Tigers were shit. But, you still have to be good enough to score, which the Canberra Raiders were. They scored something like, they were going up more than about a point a minute. That was like 40-0 or 46-0, whatever it was at half time. And it looked like it was, the Roosters game all over again, where, Canberra are going to win, 70-0, 80-0, 90-0. Like, that's what it was going to end up being. Like, they were going to put up, a similar kind of score that the Roosters did only a few weeks before. And then all of a sudden they came out after half time, and I was like, we don't give a shit. We don't care. And then the Tigers run in 2 or 3 tries. And admittedly, it is hard psychologically to keep yourself up when you're up, 40-0 at half time. But then the Tigers, but you see the top teams, they don't let up, right? You saw, the Roosters went on with it, scoring 70 points. Penrith, very rarely let up last year. Parramatta, like all these other teams, didn't let up, and they just switched off, and they managed to switch back on, score another about 3 tries, ended up winning the game about 58-16 or whatever it was. It was just like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, the first half was brilliant. Second half was, as much as they still won the half, they were nowhere near as good as what they were in the first half. And as much as they weren't woeful in the second half, they weren't good either. And there was a massive drop-off. And there was it was just, the bad was really bad last year. If they can improve that, they could have a 2019-like season where they could go on and make a grand final. But the problem is, I don't think they have the discipline to do that. I think at best they're going to be around that kind of area that they finished last year. I think they're going to be in that 6 to 10 range, 6 to 10th place range. I can't really, like, they've got the talent there where I don't think they'll be towards the bottom half, but I don't think they're going to have the discipline that they did in 2019 to really, and 2020, mind you, where they made the prelim. I don't think they have that kind of discipline to go deep into the finals. I think they'll switch off, they'll do something stupid, and they'll end up getting beaten, and they're just gonna capitulate in the finals. I just don't think they have that discipline to keep it up week in, week out to get through the finals. The Rabbitohs in 7th place last year, they had a real stop-start season. Like, every time you thought, okay, the Rabbitohs are on here, they're going to start blowing teams away now. Like, they're going to, you think, they've got a couple of wins, and they win 2 or 3 games, you're like, oh great, like if you're a South supporter, you'll think, oh great, we're going to, run away with it. We're going to finish top 4 now. Push Penrith. We could potentially push Penrith to a premiership, and we could potentially win it. And then they come back down, and they didn't. They play poorly. So again, their problem last year was that their discipline. They just could not. When the important things, like when they were put under pressure, they capitulated. They finished. They finished seventh. They made the prelim final again last year, which, there's something like 5 prelims in a row, and they haven't won a premiership. They've only made one grand final out of 5 prelim final appearances, and I think that comes back to what I was just saying a moment ago: is discipline. If they can get that right, they can win. They can win the premiership potentially. As much as I hate to say that as a Roosters supporter, I think that they can potentially win it. They've got the team to win it. It's just that they don't have the discipline. I think the biggest problem is they don't have it. Like, they lost Adam Reynolds, and I just think Adam Reynolds, they don't have that guy that can, they've got the flair of like Mitchell and Walker and that, but they needed someone that just, okay, it's getting a bit frenetic now, let's reel it in a bit and go back to our structures. I don't think they have that kind of player there at the moment. And if they can find that kind of player, like if they get, that young halfback does that this year, they could potentially push for a premiership this year. Like, I think, Penrith won't be as strong this year with Carousel and Kikau not there. If they can get the discipline right, the Rabbitohs can win it. And that game's the same as my team that finished one position above them last year, the Roosters. They had a really poor start of the year. They were the same as the Raiders. They had a really poor start at the start of the year. The very stop-start, couldn't really get going. Losing game, they were competitive, and then they just backed off. And then second half of the year, really strong. They were just they were competitive against Penrith. A lot of people, including myself, thought they were ripped off. There's a couple of poor decisions. They beat Melbourne in Melbourne. They were so much they were really strong. And then they beat the Rabbitohs in the last week of the regular round and at the new stadium, and you just think myself as a Roosters supporter, we could have a 2010 type year where we could potentially go through the finals, cause havoc and potentially, hopefully with a better result than the 2010 grand final, because we, finished in the same position. We finished in 6th spot. Was really strong. We could make the finals. Then it just all capitulated in the finals. I will say this for both teams. They were both looking for a fight. Both the Rabbitohs and the Roosters were looking for a fight in that game rather than play footy. South then eventually switched on to start playing footy, and that's why they ended up winning the game. The Roosters just kept looking for fights, and that's why they lost. And I think this is, if both teams can control it this year, both teams get smarter, they think about what they're doing, don't get carried away, they don't get pulled into this bullshit. I reckon this will be the best year, potential best year that there could be a Roosters and Rabbitohs grand final. I know it hasn't happened since the 30s, and people say that every single year. Oh, there's going to be a Roosters Rabbitohs grand final this year. Oh, I hope there's a Roosters. I think this year could be the best year that we could have it. We always get close. 2013, it could have happened. 2014, if the Roosters didn't lose the first week of the finals, that it could have happened that year. But, I reckon this is a good year. Good year to win it. Have it happen. Melbourne last year finished 5th. bit like the Roosters in 2021. A lot of injuries, yet they bloody kept soldiering up, kept turning up, doing well. A lot of people expected them to slide after Cameron Smith retired, but they just kept turning up. They kept going there, kept being competitive, kept winning games, and they ended up finishing 5th. The problem was that the injuries eventually caught up with them. They ended up losing to Canberra the first week at home, and ended up losing. And they could... I don't see them... and people... And again, I know, getting on the bandwagon, people always say, oh, this is the year with Melbourne. People said it with the year after they got breached. People said it after Cooper Cronk retired. People said it after Billy Slater retired. Cooper Cronk went to the Roosters in 2018. So the end of 2017, they thought Melbourne would drop. They made the grand final in 2018. They won the premiership in 2020. They said the same thing when Billy Slater retired at the end of the 2018 season. Again, won the premiership in 2020. Cameron Smith retired at the end of 2020. They thought they were going to slide. Melbourne still had a good year in 2021. I think just this year, I think eventually it'll catch up with them. This is my bold position. I don't think it's even a bold prediction, to be honest. They've just lost so many experienced players. They lost, and I know they've still got a lot of players there, but, blokes like Harry Grant, but they've lost. Look at the blokes they've lost. They lost Brandon Smith. They've lost virtually all their forwards. Pappenhausen isn't fully fit. And when he is fully fit, how much confidence is he going to have? He's been out a lot for the last 2 years. He's been injured quite a lot. Is he worried that he's going to injure his knee? Will he, worried that his knee's going to pack up again? Is he worried that he's going to get another head knock? I can. If there's one team that I can, if there's two teams I can see sliding out of the 8th from last year, it's Melbourne and Canberra. Those are the two, in my opinion, the two most likely teams to fall out of the 8, simply because Melbourne have lost too many players. I just think that, you can't just keep losing, all your players year on year and continually make the finals. Eventually it has to catch up with you. And I think this, especially when they've lost the calibre of players that they have over the last 2 years, I think they're going to struggle. Parramatta Eels, they're going to be an interesting one this year because obviously they made the grand final last year, played terribly, admittedly, in the grand final, but they got blown off the park. But they still made the grand final last year. It'll be interesting to see what they do this year because I think a lot of it will revolve around Josh Hudson. See, last year, Reid Marnie had a great year. When, he was out, Parramatta struggled. When he was in, they were great. And, he was a leading factor why Parramatta made the grand final. The same will be with Josh Hudson. If he stays fit, he's come up from Canberra. If he can get his ACL right, I reckon Parramatta will be there or thereabouts again this year. They'll be quite, they won't go away. But on the flip side, I think if Josh Hudson gets injured, they are going to have a real tough year this year. And I reckon they'll be struggling to make the 8. All of it will revolve around the fitness of Josh Hudson. If Josh Hudson plays majority of the year, I reckon top 4. They'll be there or thereabouts. But if he gets injured, especially if it's a long-term injury, that happens earlier in the year, they can kiss their season goodbye because even if they make the 8, which I highly doubt they would if Josh Hudson doesn't play, they're not going to do anything. A lot of their attack revolves around the quality dummy half, and losing Reid Marnie to the Dogs. I just think that they need a quality backup dummy half, because if they don't have that, because Josh Hodgson, with his knee, you can't trust it, right? He's had a lot of time out the last few years. He gets injured, they can kiss the season goodbye. They won't win it. Whether they win the premiership with him, who knows? He was a strong reason why the Raiders made the grand final in 2019. But I just can't see. He's going to be he will be the reason why they either have a top year or a shit year. I don't think there's going to be much. Then I can't see Parramatta having an average year. It's either going to be a terrific year or a shit year, and there's going to be nothing in between. And that's my opinion. There'll be top 4, bottom 4. There won't be much in between. The Cowboys, they've got a good young team. But last year they had a really easy draw. They lost to Parramatta in the prelim. They just beat the Sharks in the prelim. I'm sorry, not in the prelim, in the first week of the finals. They won Golden Point there. I just can't. I don't know. They just needed. They had a pretty easy draw last year, and whether they win, they have got a tougher draw this year. And I think we'll test them. Them and the Sharks, I put them in the same boat. I'll talk it to both of them at the same time. Both had a ridiculously easy draw last year. Yet their finals game in the first week was probably the worst game of the finals. I'll say that, and the Roosters Rabbitohs game was the worst game of the finals. And sure enough, a lot of people were concerned that whoever won that game was going to be their only win in the finals. And the team that lost is going to get knocked out the next week, and the other team's going to get knocked out in the prelim. Sure enough, the people that did predict that were right. And it was, I just think this will be tough. They've both got, relatively young teams. Both have pretty relatively new coaches. Fitzgibbon, this is only his second year. Payton's only in his about third year. So it's, they're still early days coaches, but it's going to be, the tougher draws are going to be harder. They didn't really test the top teams last year. And, it's going to be hard for them to they just need to take their game to the next level. Both teams have got the ability, both teams have got the squads to do it. Both of them have the ability to get to that next level. It's just where they can. And if they can, again, they're a top 4 contender. If they don't, they're going to go out the same way that they did last year. They're just going to be basically out relatively easy. They're going to be easy beats in the finals. They just need to find that little something where they can win in the big games. Then someone that doesn't have a problem in the big games is Penrith. Back-to-back champions. But this is going to be a real test this year. Now, Penrith have been great for 3 years. Lost in 2020 to Melbourne. Won 2021. Won 2022. Now, they haven't really looked challenged either year. You could have said maybe Melbourne in 21. Ended up, can't even remember who they beat in 21, but they won that grand final pretty easily. They beat Para pretty easily last year. This year is going to be the challenge. And the challenge is because they've lost Api Carousel and Viliami Kikau. Now, both of them were very crucial to their to Penrith's success over the last 3 years. Now, Carousel's a 3-time premiership winning player, obviously having won 2 with Penrith, 1 at South, and Kikau's a 2-time premiership player. A lot of people, including myself, thought he was almost the player of he really should have got the Clive Churchill in 21, and instead of Nathan Cleary. I just thought he had a barnstorming game. When he did have the ball, he just destroyed teams. When he didn't, everyone went in on him, which allowed Penrith to go around the back and create space around the back on the left-hand side. And, I just think that it'll be interesting to see how they replace both teams. So, obviously, last year, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, they also won the lower grades. They also won reserve grade. They won the Jersey flag or whatever they call it last year. So they've got players that can come up, but there's a big gap between being a good reserve grade player and a good first grade player. There's a big jump, and because a lot of you can go through. There'll be there's players every year that you hear about, like, oh, they've been tearing up in reserve grade, like, they deserve this spot. And they get into first grade and they just crack. For whatever reason, whether it's, the big crowd, or they're just simply not up to it, whatever it is, they just don't get, not up to it. So it's, especially Carousel, like, don't get me wrong, this is not taking a side of Kikau, because I think he is one of the best second rollers in the game right now. I would put it like he's in the top 3 back rollers right now in the game. So, I rate Kikau very highly. I just think Carousel might be that slightly bigger loss, simply because he provides that good service out of dummy half. And you need someone out, because in the dummy half is I would say is the most important position in the game, because it's a guy that touches the ball every single play that you are in attack. He decides, okay, are we going to the left or are we going to the right? And you have to go, okay, and then they decide which way it's going. They have to see something. They have, playmakers either side yelling at them, I want the ball, I want the ball. They have to have a, split second bang, okay, we're going right, or we're going left, or I'm going myself here. And then not only do they have to see that in a split second, they also have to hit the ball bang right there on the chest. They have to hit the bloke right there. And to make sure, okay, the halfback or the 5'8" or something, I'm going to give it to him. I have to hit him right there so that they can do whatever. If they have it slightly behind or slightly too high, or slightly too low, the pace that these blokes play at in first grade, they don't hit that mark time and time again. The whole play could be down, could run down, and everything changes. Half a second at that level is 1 to 2 seconds at every other level. It just gives that defense a little bit of extra time to come up, and it's going to be interesting to see who they're going to replace Carousel with, and how they go, and also how they're going to replace Kikau's Barnstorming Wrongs, because not many Blues can do that. There's a guy that's 6'5", 115 kilos or whatever he is, but he as athletic as anything with his Barnstorming Wrongs, because blokes like him, they attract players, whether he has the ball or not. They see him, whether he's running a decoy line or not, people go towards him. And again, this is what I was just saying a second ago. That half second at that level is a difference between a play coming off and a play not coming off. And it's the same as defense. You hesitate for half a second, you're gone at this level. If a center turns in for half a second, the attacking players are on the outside. It becomes a 2-on-1. The winger goes in the corner every time, and especially as a team as good as Penrith. So it's going to be interesting how they sort two blokes in those positions, because they've got don't get me wrong, Penrith have got great depth, but it's going to be very, very hard to fill those roles. And, if they... and I just think, look, Penrith are still going to be there, provided that they keep their best teams on the field week in, week out. Like, obviously, that's the same as everyone. Can they keep the team on the paddock week in, week out? If they can, the main players, then anything can happen. But I just think Penrith are not going to be. Look, I think they're going to be a top 4 team. They provided don't blokes get injured. They're going to be in the top 4. But then I don't think that they're going to be head and shoulders above everybody else that they have been for the last 3 years. I think, the Roosters will be able to challenge them this year. I think the Rabbitohs will be able to challenge them this year. I think the Eels, if they keep their team fit this year, I think they will be able to challenge them. Sharks and Cowboys, it'll depend if they can take the game to another level. They could potentially challenge. I just think they've been brought back to the pack. I don't think if they were in a 100-meter race, or before they were they were the Usain Bolt. They were like way out in front, like they were way 5 or 10 meters. It's going to be a bit like the last Olympics, where it was very close in the final. Like there's not that there's not a Usain Bolt. There's not that runaway champion. They could potentially win 3 in a row. They could be the first team since Parramatta to win 3 in a row. But if they play like they did against St Helens, like fuck me, like in the World Club Challenge, they ain't gonna win playing like that, because they're gonna get decimated. But it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, they were missing a few players that game. There were Dylan and Edwards and a couple of others. Liam Martin, I don't believe, was playing either. So it's going to be a different season. So they do have a few players that come back, but yeah, let's see how they go. I think that they've been equalised. Just like put it at that. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. Because, obviously a lot of people have got different opinions. Who do you think is going to be the big improver? My opinion is going to be the Bulldogs this year. Who do you think the great side is going to be? I think it's going to be Melbourne. And who do you think is going to be the dark horse? I personally can't see a dark horse, but, if you can see a dark horse, tell me. I would be interesting to hear it. But until next time, thanks for listening.